The microphone crackled as Big Bill Henderson's hand gripped it like a weapon. February 14th, 1975, Madison Square Garden was packed with 300 boxing legends for the ABC Sports Awards. But Big Bill Henderson, the heavyweight champion of the 1950s, had other plans. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill's voice boomed through the speakers. I've been asked to present the Athlete of the Year award, but before I do, I need to say something that's been eating at me for 2 years. At a front table, Muhammad Ali sat perfectly still. He was 33, fresh off his victory over George Foreman in Zaire. The man the world called the greatest was at the peak of his powers. Boxing used to be a gentleman's sport, Henderson continued. Real champions fought with honor, with power, with respect. But what I see today is a dancing clown making a mockery of everything we built. The camera cut to Ali. For 3 seconds, his face showed no reaction. Then he smiled. Not defensive, not angry, just interested. Ali reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black notebook. As Henderson continued his attack on national television, Muhammad Ali began writing. This sport was built by men like Jack Dempsey, Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano, Bill declared. Men who stood their ground and threw real punches. Not this rope-a-dope nonsense. Not this float-like-a-butterfly garbage. That's not boxing, that's ballet with gloves on. If this story of unexpected grace and wisdom moves you, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about a time when someone's response to criticism completely changed your perspective. What Big Bill Henderson didn't know was that Muhammad Ali had just written 4 words in his notebook that would change both their lives forever. He's fighting his fear. As Henderson returned to his table, the ballroom buzzed with shocked whispers. Ali's team surrounded him, expecting outrage. "We need to issue a statement," Ali's lawyer said urgently. "Henderson just humiliated you on national television." Ali looked up from his notebook. "Sue him for what? Saying what he believes. That man just gave me a gift." "Because," Ali said, "he showed me that there are still people who don't understand what we're doing. And if Bill Henderson doesn't understand, then maybe I haven't been teaching clearly enough." The next morning, Ali called a press conference. 50 reporters crammed into his training camp gym, expecting a verbal counterpunch. Ali walked in wearing simple training gear. "Yesterday, Big Bill Henderson said some things that a lot of people thought were disrespectful. But you know what I think? I think Bill is right about one thing. Boxing has changed. What I do in the ring doesn't look like what Bill did when he was champion. It's different." The reporters exchanged confused glances. "So here's what I'm proposing," Ali continued. "I want to invite Bill Henderson to join me on a special ABC Sports broadcast. He can show America what real boxing looks like. And maybe I can show him what it looks like, according to mine. Not in a fight, but in a conversation." One reporter raised his hand. "Muhammad, aren't you angry?" Ali smiled. "Angry? No, I'm grateful. Bill Henderson earned the right to speak his mind. But maybe it's time we had an honest conversation about why boxing evolves." Within 48 hours, ABC arranged a special broadcast for March 1st, 1975, The Art of Boxing, a Conversation Between Champions. Howard Cosell would moderate. 300 guests would attend. Big Bill Henderson accepted from his Philadelphia home. "I'll show that boy what real boxing looks like," Bill told his wife. "Power does, heart does, standing your ground does." But Bill Henderson had no idea what Ali had been planning in that notebook. March 1st, 1975. The ABC studios buzzed with anticipation. Big Bill Henderson arrived like a conquering king, wearing his old championship belt. Former champions shook his hand with respect. Muhammad Ali entered differently. No belt, no entourage. He walked directly to Big Bill and extended his hand. "Thank you for being here, Bill. What we're about to do is important." Henderson shook reluctantly. "Just don't waste my time with your poetry and dancing, boy." Ali's smile never wavered. "We're talking about boxing. Your boxing and my boxing." Howard Cosell stood center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness is unprecedented. 2 heavyweight champions brought together to answer a simple question. What is boxing?" Cosell turned to Henderson. "Bill, please show us what you mean." For 5 minutes, Henderson delivered a demonstration of classical heavyweight boxing. Using a heavy bag, he showed proper stance, weight transfer, knockout power. Each punch landed with thunderous impact. Jab, cross, hook, textbook precision. This is boxing, Bill said between breaths. You stand your ground. You hit harder than you get hit. No dancing, no rope-a-dope tricks, just strength, courage, and will. The 300 people applauded respectfully. This was what boxing looked like to them. Now, Muhammad, Cosell said, your response? Ali stood slowly, removing his jacket. He walked to center stage, but instead of approaching the heavy bag, he asked for a blackboard. 2 stage hands wheeled one out. Ali picked up chalk and turned to Henderson. Bill, can I ask you something? Henderson crossed his arms. Go ahead. When you were champion, how many fights did you have? 53 fights, 48 wins, 3 losses. Ali began writing the numbers. And in those 48 wins, how many knockouts? 32. Impressive. Ali turned to face Henderson. Now those 3 losses, what happened? Henderson's face darkened. I got caught. But how? Did you get outpunched or outsmarted? The studio fell silent. Bill, your first loss was to Jimmy Bradford in 1956. You were winning through 8 rounds. Then what happened? Henderson's jaw clenched. He caught me with a counter right. Ali wrote counter on the blackboard. The second loss to Mike DeMarco in 1959. Same story, right? What's your point? Henderson snapped. My point is that power without strategy is just violence. Violence alone doesn't win championships. It wins rounds. But chess wins fights. Ali drew 2 stick figures on the board. One was labeled power and the other strategy. What you showed us just now was beautiful, Bill. Absolutely textbook punching. Perfect form. Perfect technique. Any trainer in this room would be proud to teach what you just demonstrated. Ali paused, letting that compliment sink in. But that heavy bag doesn't punch back. It doesn't think. It doesn't adapt. It doesn't study your patterns for 8 rounds and then catch you in the 9th with the counter right you never saw coming. Ali tapped the chalk against the board for emphasis. Real opponents do all those things. They learn. They adjust. They wait for that one moment when your habit becomes predictable. The 300 people in the studio leaned forward. This wasn't what they expected. Ali wasn't defending his style with emotion. He was dismantling Henderson's assumptions with pure logic. Let me show you something, Ali said. I need a volunteer, someone who can throw real punches. A 24-year-old light heavyweight named Marcus Thompson stepped forward. Marcus, try to hit me for 2 minutes. I'm going to stand in this circle and not throw a single punch back. I'm just going to show everyone what boxing really is. Marcus nodded nervously, putting on sparring gloves. What happened next was a masterclass in defensive boxing that left the entire studio breathless. For 2 full minutes, Marcus Thompson threw every combination he knew at Muhammad Ali. Jab, cross, hook, left uppercut, right hand. Every punch thrown with the speed and precision of a top contender. And for 2 minutes, Ali made him miss with movements so subtle they seemed almost impossible. A slight shoulder roll that turned a straight right into thin air. A small step back, perfectly timed, that left Marcus punching at nothing. Head movement so precise it looked choreographed, yet was entirely reactive. But the real education wasn't in what Ali did. It was in what happened to Marcus. After 60 seconds, you could see the confusion on the young fighter's face. How was Ali making this look so easy? After 90 seconds, Marcus's arms began dropping. His combinations became slower, sloppier. His footwork, sharp at the start, was now flat and heavy. Frustration replaced confidence on his face. He was exhausted not from getting hit, but from the mental and physical energy of constantly missing, of calculating angles that led nowhere, of throwing punches into empty space, of chasing a target that was always exactly where he couldn't reach. When the 2 minutes ended, Marcus was breathing heavily, hands on his knees, sweat dripping from his face. Ali wasn't even breathing hard. His shirt was barely wrinkled. "Thank you, Marcus," Ali said. He turned to Henderson. "That's what you call dancing. But let me ask you, Bill, who won those 2 minutes? The man who threw 100 punches and landed nothing? Or the man who threw 0 punches and made his opponent defeat himself?" Henderson's hands unclenched slightly. Ali walked back to the blackboard and drew, "Power plus intelligence equals mastery." "The boxing you showed us, Bill, it's the foundation, essential. But that's just the beginning. What I do isn't disrespectful to what you did. It's built on what you did." Ali's voice grew passionate but never loud. "Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion, he fought differently than anyone before him. Defensive genius, mind games, making opponents frustrated. Some people said he was corrupting boxing. Some said he wasn't fighting like a man should fight, but he was evolving it, showing that intelligence could be as powerful as strength. Joe Louis came after and combined Johnson's defense with devastating power. Another evolution, he showed you could be smart and powerful. Sugar Ray Robinson moved like a dancer, but hit like a truck. Beautiful footwork, devastating punches. Evolution again. Each generation building on what came before, not destroying it." Ali wrote the names on the blackboard. Johnson to Lewis, to Robinson to Ali. Every great champion brought something new, Bill. Not because they were disrespecting the past, but because they understood that fighting the same way as everyone else means you're predictable. And predictable fighters lose. They lose to the ones who dare to be different. The studio was completely silent now. Even the cameraman had stopped moving. Henderson's arms had uncrossed. He was listening now, really listening. Ali walked directly to Henderson, standing face to face. "Bill, you said I make boxing look like ballet. You're right, because ballet is about control, precision, making difficult things look effortless. But you know what else ballet is? It's about performing under pressure, maintaining grace when everything in your body is screaming to give up. Just like boxing." Henderson's eyes were glistening. "You called me a clown for rope-a-dope against Foreman," Ali continued gently. "Do you know why I developed that strategy? Because George Foreman hit harder than any human I'd ever faced. If I fought him your way, standing toe-to-toe, I would have been knocked out in 3 rounds. I had to evolve or die." Ali placed his hand on Henderson's shoulder. "You weren't wrong to fight the way you did, Bill. For your era, for your opponents, for your body type, it was perfect. You were a great champion. You made men twice as big as me afraid to fight you. That's real power." He paused. "But boxing doesn't stop evolving when we retire. It can't. Because if it does, if we demand that everyone fight exactly like we fought, then we're not preserving the sport. We're embalming it. We're turning something alive into something dead." 300 people held their breath, watching history unfold in front of them. "I'm not your enemy," Ali said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I'm your student, Bill. I watched your fights when I was a kid. I studied how you set up that left hook of yours, how you never back down. Everything I do in that ring is built on what you and Joe Louis and Jack Johnson taught the world about heart and courage. I just took those lessons and asked myself, what comes next? What's the next chapter?" Ali's hand tightened on Henderson's shoulder. "I added some new pages to the book you started writing, because that's what students do for their teachers. They don't burn the book. They honor it by adding to it." Big Bill Henderson's stern facade finally crumbled. The iron mask he'd worn for 53 professional fights, the toughness that had carried him through 3 wars in the ring and countless battles outside it, all of it melted away in that moment. Tears rolled down his weathered face as he looked at this young champion who had turned what should have been a confrontation into a conversation, what could have been revenge into respect, what might have been humiliation into honor. Henderson's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "I thought you were mocking everything I believed in, everything I fought for. I thought your style was disrespectful to men who fought the way I fought, who bled the way I bled." "No, sir," Ali said firmly, but gently. "I'm honoring you by refusing to stay the same, by refusing to let boxing stay the same, because you didn't stay the same either. You evolved from the fighters before you. You learned from them, and then you became something new. That's what champions do. They build. They don't just protect." Big Bill Henderson pulled Ali into an embrace. The old champion and the young champion stood there on live television, while 300 people rose to their feet in thunderous applause. When they separated, Henderson spoke into the microphone. "I came here tonight to prove you wrong, Muhammad. Instead, you taught me something I should have learned long ago. There's more than one way to be great, and being different isn't the same as being wrong. Ali smiled. You already knew that, Bill. You just forgot for a while. Sometimes we all need reminding. Howard Cosell wiped his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed tonight transcends boxing. This is about respect, evolution, and the courage to change your mind when presented with truth. 3 days after the broadcast, Henderson called Ali's training camp. Muhammad, would you mind if I came to Deer Lake? I'd like to watch you train, not to criticize, to learn. Ali's response was immediate. Bill, you're welcome anytime. Bring your notebook. I'll bring mine. For the next 18 months, Big Bill Henderson became a regular at Ali's camps. The old champion and new champion developed a genuine friendship. Henderson began working with young fighters, teaching power fundamentals while incorporating the defensive sophistication he'd learned from Ali. When Ali fought Ken Norton in 1976, Henderson was in his corner. When Ali won that brutal decision, the first person he hugged was Henderson. We did it, Bill, Ali said. Old school and new school together. No, Henderson replied. You did it. I just finally understood what I was watching. When Big Bill Henderson passed away in 1987, Muhammad Ali spoke at his funeral. Bill Henderson called me a dancing clown once, Ali told the mourners. He was trying to insult me. But you know what? He was also trying to protect something he loved. That's not an enemy. That's a guardian. And guardians deserve our respect. Ali paused. Bill taught me that the greatest victories aren't won with fists. They're won with patience, understanding, and the courage to teach instead of destroy. He challenged me to prove myself. And in doing that, he made me better. That's what real champions do for each other. Today, the footage from that March 1975 special remains a touchstone for understanding Ali's genius. Not his physical genius, but his emotional intelligence. His ability to see past anger to the fear behind it, to respond to attacks with education rather than retaliation. True strength isn't about proving you're better than someone else. It's about helping them become better than they were. Big Bill Henderson challenged Muhammad Ali to defend his legacy. Ali responded by expanding both their legacies beyond anything either could have achieved alone. Sometimes the greatest fights are the ones we choose not to have. And sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating our opponents, but from transforming them into teachers, students, and friends.